Going to the third important word that is mentioned in the preamble of the Constitution, it is the word secular. Now, the word secular was added into the Constitution by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, and the Supreme Court has said that the word secular is not alien to the Constitution. Rather, if one reads Articles 25 to 28 of the Constitution, which guarantees the fundamental right to freedom of religion, uh, you would have assumed that this was what the state wanted to be, that the state wanted to have a secular character and not a religious one. So I think that, having said, secularism today becomes a very important touchstone of public policy. Now, coming to the next word that is used in the preamble of the Constitution, called democratic. The word democratic is also very relevant and important, as one would say that democracy is the kind of system that the polity or the society wishes to adopt. And democracy or democratic form of governance is generally considered under the doctrine of popular sovereignty, that the position of the supreme power is in the hands of the people, for the people, and by the people. Now, world over, if one will have to analyze, you will see that democracy in the world is actually an indirect democracy. So, democracy generally is of two types. One is called direct, the other is called indirect. And in direct democracy, you will notice that the supreme power lies directly with the people, and hence they can actually decide issues based on referendum, or they can also exercise issues such as recall of their representatives. So the people will have a direct call on the democratic process of public administration and public policy. Rather, every other important public policy legislation has to pass through the referendum process. So it is direct democracy in which the citizens directly decide on the law that is to be enacted for them. And any public servant can be recalled from his public office by the citizens. So the citizens put you in office, and the citizens can actually remove you from office as well. So this is a direct democracy. Generally, direct democracies may probably work in smaller nations and countries like Switzerland and others. But in bigger nations, direct democracy is difficult to operate and manage, because finally what you believe in democracy is there must be equal political rights to all, and we must hold the form of government that we elect accountable, and that is important, and that can be achieved generally by indirect democracy, which generally can be either parliamentary form of democracy or the presidential form of democracy. So in indirect democracy, I think the people elect their representatives as members of parliament or members of legislative assembly, and these so-called nominated members actually govern the society. This kind of indirect democracy is also called as representative democracy, and the Indian Constitution actually brings about what is known as the representation democracies. And while in the democracy the parliament is supreme, the parliament is entrusted with the lawmaking power, with the power of making policies and creating actions. You will notice that it is the executive that is responsible to protect the principles of democracy through the institution of the parliament. In India, democracy embraces not only political democracy, but it also embraces social democracy, or what we may also add as economic democracy. Now, Dr. Ambedkar, in a speech that he gave in the Constituent Assembly on November 25th, 1949, probably just the day before the Constitution got enacted. So he said that political democracy cannot last until there lies at the base of it social democracy. What is social democracy? It is a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity. The principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity are not only to be treated as separate items, they form a union in the sense that to diverse one from the other is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. Liberty cannot be diverse from equality, equality cannot be diverse from liberty, nor can liberty and equality be diverse from fraternity. So I think stressing upon the democratic values, I think Dr. Ambedkar very clearly said that you can talk about democracy in a political context of how the government has to be formed, who has to form it, and how it has to be formed. But the real fabric of democracy is in the society, and social democracy is critical because over there, these three words, liberty, equality, and fraternity, will actually ensure political democracy. The Supreme Court also has kind of agreed with Dr. Ambedkar when the Supreme Court said that the Constitution actually wants to establish an egalitarian social order in which every citizen, either irrespective of social, economic, and political background, enjoys the same kind of democratic values in this republic. So I think democracy and democratic institutions have a very important role, and the preamble actually states the same as an important touchstone of what is going to be expected in the country. So I believe that actually, to be honest, if you look at these two words, democracy, they are actually a combination of two words. They are two Greek words, uh, demos and kratia, which means people and the rule. So demo means people, kratic means or kratia means rule. So people's rule is what democracy is. So it's the combination of two Greek words which have led to this word called democracy. Right now, just to tell you that referendum, recall, initiative, and plebiscite, these are the indirect forms of democracy. But I think as we move forward, you will understand that democratic principles, democratic values are the vision of the preamble of the Constitution, and the preamble of the Constitution clearly becomes the document for all of us to realize how the constitutional ideals are going to be followed in the days to come. Let's go to the last word called republic, uh, which is also mentioned in the Constitution. We'll also take up the word liberty, equality, and fraternity because I think each of these words are very, very critical and important. Republic means, friends, that the head of the state is an elected official and not a official who attains that position or who inherits that position due to some hereditary, kind of succession. So, in a republic, friends, the the monarch kind of a system is taken away, which means you don't have a head of state who actually becomes the head of state by inheriting the crown or the seat, as the case may be. So kingship is out of the question. There is no queen. There is no monarchism. We are a republic where the head of the state is an elected person. He represents the ideals of the society. He is having someone who comes from the society. He's not someone who's privileged. That's very important. And he holds this public office to be accountable to the people at large. In India, the head of the state is the president of India or the governor, and they have a tenure of 5 years. And hence, you will notice that the republic means that the state is having the right to choose its own head, and it is free from any kind of external influence or any kind of external rule, and no one from outside is actually determining the direction of the country. I think the people of the country have into their own hands the direction in which the country has to be taken forward to. So I think all of these words are words with very heavy implications and expressions and ideas and philosophy, and probably they are the way that govern the kind of polity that is there in India. And hence, friends, when you look at all of these five words in the preamble, you are reminded of the fact that look, none of these, though say socialist, secular, were added to the constitution. They were not originally there, so they were added. Uh, you will notice that though they were added in 1976, today they are the basic fabric of the constitution. They are the basic fabric of public administration and public policy. So these are non-alienable concepts. They are non-alienable doctrines, and at any point of time, I don't think anyone can trample, change, or deviate or distract from the basic vision that is mentioned in the preamble of the Constitution. And I believe that this five words are the basic tenets of constitution and public administration in this country. That is the philosophy and the idea behind the aspects of public administration in the constitution. Now, taking the preamble forward, I think it's important that one starts understanding the significance of the preamble. Is the preamble significant in any sense? I don't see any reason why it should not be. But I think over a period of time, after we gave the constitution, the significance of the preamble has been debated for quite some time. And a lot of people thought that the preamble is not the part of the constitution because the constitution starts from article 1 or part 1. So the preamble is not necessarily a part of it. But I think the Supreme Court has been very clear, and they have laid down this to rest as early as in 1960, in the case of what we call as the Berubari case, Berubari, Berubari Union case of 1960. Uh, this case was a case that came from the President of India as a reference under Article 143 of the Constitution. And the issue in this case was the implementation of the Indo Pakistan Agreement relating to the Berubari Union and exchange of enclaves in 1960. Now, the Supreme Court in 1960 said that the preamble shows the general purpose behind the several provisions in the Constitution and is thus a key to the minds of the makers of the Constitution. Further, where the terms used in any article are ambiguous or capable of more than one meaning, some assistance at interpretation may be taken from the objectives enshrined in the preamble. So the Supreme Court very clearly says that the preamble is the guiding light, and wherever some kind of guiding light is required in interpretation of the Constitution, then the preamble is something that the judges can always rely upon. And in Keshananda Bharati case, the case decided in 1973, which is also called the case on basic structure doctrine, held that the preamble is a part of the constitution, it's integral to constitution. It is not just a guiding light. I think the preamble is the first opening part of the constitution, and it's extremely important that the constitution shall always be read and interpreted in the light of the preamble. So it's not that the preamble just guides. I think the constitution actually, it's like the earth looking for the sun, and hence the preamble is like the sun. The preamble is the grand noble vision of the makers of the constitution, and hence at no point of time can the preamble be considered as a separate part. It's an integral part. So in the case of LIC of India, it's a case of 1995. Again, you will notice that the Supreme Court held, this is the LIC of India versus Consumer Education and Research Center, 1995. The Supreme Court held that keeping everything aside, that the preamble is an integral part of the Constitution. Uh, See, now, two things should be noted at this point of time. The preamble is neither a source of the power of the legislature, nor is it something that prohibits the powers of the legislature. We are not saying that the preamble is kind of justiciable in any form, in any court of law. However, I think the preamble is the way in which public administration will be guided. The directive principles of state policy wherever they are in some kind of ambiguous nature or character. The preamble should be the part which should guide any such actions as the case may be. The Supreme Court did say that uh, you know its preamble is like the dream that this the makers said what India should look like. And when we say India should look like something, and India should be a state which should be an economic, a nuclear superpower, or the third largest economy with 1 trillion kind of GDP and so on and so forth. For whatever ideas one may have about the Indian state, I think the ideas emanate from the preamble. So the few jurists have said that the preamble is like the jewel in the crown. So this, however important the crown is, it's the jewel that shines and makes the crown look very, quite attractive and something that is needed to be looked at. So the preamble has been also said by certain jurists to be the most precious part of the Constitution, and one can measure the effectiveness of the Constitution by reading the preamble. Interestingly, the preamble also states the political wisdom of the makers of the Constitution, what they thought should be the society. So, the philosophy of giving India a society which shall have liberty, justice, equality, and fraternity is what the preamble was supposed to be all about. Okay, now let's look at liberty. You know, the term liberty, friends, means the absence of restraint on the activities of individuals, at the same time providing opportunities for the development of individual personalities. That's liberty for you, right? In some extent, many would assume that liberty is some kind of a right. Yes, it can be, but it's liberty in the sense that you are a human being, free onto yourself. You have given the state the power to create a kind of a government, and this government shall respect your liberty as the case may be. So, if you notice the word liberty and its importance in the preamble, it means that citizens of this country have, liberty of what? Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. And when liberty is violated in the means of fundamental right, such kind of infringement of fundamental right shall be adjudicated, shall be justiciable, and it shall be enforceable in a court of law. So, liberty should not be construed as an absolute liberty or a license to do whatever you like. It's a liberty of responsibility, it's a liberty of the duty first obligation, it is a liberty of exercising your fundamental rights in a responsible and a free manner, as the case may be. To be honest, the idea of liberty and equality and fraternity in the Indian Constitution was taken from the French Revolution, which happened between 1789 and 1799. So, I think what was put in the preamble becomes a very, very significant part of understanding what it means. Second, let's look at the word justice. This is a very complicated word, a word that may have quite a few, meaning as it would claim. So we have defined justice in three forms, and that is social, economic, and political. And these are something that have to be secured to the society, the citizens, by the state through the fundamental rights and the direct principles of state policy. So, what does social justice mean? Friends, social justice denotes equal treatment, right? And all citizens, irrespective of their social background or distinctions, as we were called. And now those distinctions could be based on caste, color, race, religion, sex, and so on, shall be treated equally. And it also means, friends, when we talk about social justice, that there is no person who is going to be treated as a privileged class. So privileges shall be granted, if so, to every individual, irrespective of his caste, color, or creed, and no person of the society shall get any special or preferential treatment, as the case may be. However, you will notice that particular sections of the society in India, in ensuring social justice, like the sections from the social, uh, and economic background. Sometimes we say that, look, why is there a reservation policy in place? It could be those coming from the backward sections of the community, the SCs, the STs, and OBCs, and probably women can be treated differentially, so as to render social justice in one sense. Justice could also mean economic justice, which clearly means the principle of non discrimination. While social justice talks about equal treatment, economic justice denotes the principles of non discrimination among people on economic factors, which means the inequality of wealth has to be reduced by the state, and the state must actually try and give uh, economic opportunities to every person in the society as equal as possible. Very often than not, economic justice is also called as distributive justice, which means I think the resources and the wealth of the nation shall be distributed equally among the citizens, and that is how the disparity of wealth can be reduced to a larger extent. Distributive justice is an important connotation of economic justice. The third is political justice, as one would say that political rights, be it right to participate in the elections, the right to vote, the right of association, the right of public opinion, the right to take part in lawmaking, and so on and so forth. Such kind of rights, or be it the right of the voluntary organizations or NGOs, shall also be given access to equally to all citizens. Interestingly, it is not that the one who has more power has the more voice in a democracy. I think everyone should get equal access, equal say, as the case may be, in the democratic decision making processes of governance, and that would, in a lot sense, achieve political justice. The ideas of justice, friends, comes from the Russian Revolution of 1917, and I think that also adds a very significant part to the basic tenets of the preamble and the Constitution of India. Moving forward, let us take equality. Now, the term equality, friends, is also very interesting and very important. While we say equality is a principle under Article 14 of the Constitution, friends, it clearly says about equality, which is civic, which is political, and which is economic. So, Article 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 explicitly talk about the principal rules of equality. The directive principles also secure the same. But you will notice that equality is again not an absolute rule. Exceptions to women and children and the marginalized sections of the community can be made. And every person has the right to be treated equally before law and by the law. And equality is some kind of equal respect for human beings, despite his religion, creed, caste, or any other basis. So, equality before the democratic process, the economic process, and the social process are something that is very, very important and critical. And I think to a larger extent, equality respects not only life, but it also respects livelihood and the equal opportunity to work. These are very, very critical and important. So, issues of even gender justice are just issues that can be dealt with or under the principles of equality. One would kind of remember a kind of a very important doctrine called equal pay for equal work, which means that between men and women who are working in the same class for the same kind of activity or efforts or same kind of position that they're working, I think the equality principle would mean that men and women cannot be discriminated on pay, equal pay for equal work. This is a public policy, constitutional public policy, and that is something that you can apply in public administration as well. Let's move on to fraternity. Fraternity, friends, is so very critical and important to maintain the social fabric in the Indian society, which is unfortunately so diverse and sometimes divided. So, to maintain the unity of the society, I think fraternity is an important principle of the Constitution and its preamble. The term fraternity means brotherhood. This means promoting the highest form of peace, harmony in the society, and I think trying to transcend all religious, linguistic, regional, sometimes sectional diversities, and to embrace oneness of the nation as one Indian. So sometimes we always say that you're a South Indian, and in a very recent movie heard the actor who was saying that no, I'm an Indian from South, so I'm not a South Indian. So I think you will believe that to a larger extent, trying to bring in oneness of a nation which is divided from north to east is the principles of fraternity. Uh, Fraternity also, to a larger extent, protects the dignity of an individual. It tries to maintain equilibrium in the society, which I think is quite so very sacred for progress of democracy, for maintaining democratic values. It also casts upon people the duty not to make hate speeches, the duty not to create hatred among individuals and communities, the duty not to derogate any other individual from any other community or region or society. I think dignity of women, dignity of all kinds of people who are major or minor or who own privileges or not, I think is the principles of fraternity that are so very important for a country to remain united and for a country to actually move away from communal violence, regionalism, casteism, linguism, and sectionalism. I think in India, for a long period of time, as we all experience different forms of communalism and regionalism, I think it's very important that the principles of fraternity are followed, the principles of fraternity are enforced, the principles of fraternity are applied as public policy and public administration. We are Indians, and that is all that matters. And I think the single citizenship concept in fraternity actually probably protects the principles of fraternity. And I think that kind of barriers that are created, either politically or otherwise, have to be removed for fraternity to everlast and for fraternity to progress the ideals of democracy. So I repeat, some of these aspects that infringe the ideals of fraternity are communalism, regionalism, casteism, linguism, and sectionalism. I think all of these have no place in the constitution, and I think we have to move above all of these to actually accept the noble principles of the preamble. So I think we have kind of understood the purpose of the preamble. We have understood its significance. We have understood each and every word that is mentioned in the preamble and what it means. And finally, I think what we have also concluded here is that the preamble is an integral part of the Constitution. It is not just a guiding light, but I think it's the light itself, and it is something that will determine the rules of public policy, and that I think very clearly establishes the way the preamble would be important for public administration.